This video is brought to you by patreon.com/worsttake. Get access to exclusive live streams and Discord servers, on-screen shoutouts, and early access to some videos when you join now. Help make sure that we can continue to make content like this by supporting the Patreon. Links are in the description down below. Watson went down with an Achilles injury, and the Browns fan base in the stadium initially cheered at what they just thought was a regular injury at first and then turned out to be an Achilles injury. And I do think this point needs to be said before I continue into everything. Once the fans realized this was Achilles injury, a vast majority of Browns fans realized that they don't need to be saying anything in this moment. That it's probably best to keep your feelings to yourself. And if you are happy about this, it's 100% okay to shut up. That's where I think the vast majority of the fan base was. I do not like that the Browns fan base is being painted as these evil, mean-spirited people that were so happy to see Deshaun Watson. Like, once most people realized he had an Achilles injury, most people calmed the hell down. They even gave him the clap off on the cart. It wasn't as heroic as we've seen like stuff when Myles Garrett has gotten injured or something like that before. But obviously Deshaun Watson, not Myles Garrett, not Nick Chubb, not going to get that same level of treatment by the fans. But it was, after a certain point, respectful, but we cannot ignore the fact that the initial part of this was a very disrespectful response. Right? You cheered when he got injured. And this has led to the players kind of voicing their displeasure of this to the media, kind of pointing their ire at the fans, putting quotes out there that fans are rightfully picking apart and kind of taking umbrage with. And it has both the players pointing at the fans and the fans pointing at the players. And that's where the outrage has gone. I find this to be interesting because I think the true architect, the true people to blame for this situation have been largely untouched by the situation that happened that they created. And that's Kevin Stefanski, that's Andrew Berry, and that's Jimmy Haslam. If you want to throw Deep Podesta in there, throw Deep Podesta in there if he's involved. I don't know if he's involved. I don't know if he cares about football operations all like that. My understanding is that he's long-term planning, not necessarily day-to-day football operations. But those three definitely involved in this situation. And the reason I think they're escaping a lot of the blame is because they created this situation. We all knew during the 3-game road trip that the Cleveland Browns had after the New York Giants game that if Watson did not play better during that 3-game road trip, if the Browns did not have a better record after that 3-game road trip, you could not bring Watson back to play here in First Energy Stadium, Cleveland Browns Stadium, Huntington Bank Field, whatever you want to call it. You could not do that. The reason you couldn't do that is the potential for an ugly, ugly situation to happen in Cleveland. Whether that be the fans ruthlessly booing their own team when they're on the field, whether that be the fans cheering for an injury. These are all things that we all knew, just regular, degular Browns fans, from assessing this situation, from regular fans to people who are more close to the situation. I talked to beat reporters about this. I talked to film breakdown people. Like, we have had the conversations about the environment that the Cleveland Browns were potentially creating if they continued to put Deshaun Watson as a starter when they returned home versus the Cincinnati Bengals. We were all saying this. We were all warning of a potential ugly environment. And the reason we were warning for this and so afraid of this situation isn't because we thought it would hurt Deshaun Watson's feelings, to be clear, right? This was not about Deshaun Watson's feelings, why I wanted the Browns to avoid this situation. The reason I wanted the Browns to avoid this situation is that an ugly environment like this burns more bridges than the ones you intend to, right? Because, yeah, obviously, the bridge is burnt with this fan base in Deshaun Watson. He tore his Achilles and we cheered. That bridge is burnt. There's no coming back from that. Like, we can act like he could come back and technically play because he's under contract, but let's be honest here. That bridge is burnt. That is a wound that is not going to be recovered, especially if you understand how football players see this whole thing. It is not something that you can just be like, oh yeah, wipe that under the rug, right? That's not going to be the case. But that's not the only bridge that you burn. You risk burning bridges with people who have relationships with this guy on your team because he's on the team. See, football players call each other brothers. They call it a brotherhood. When you're on a team with somebody, that is like your family. And like many of us, we have family members, some that we agree with a lot, some that we don't agree with how they live their life, some that we, kind of think differently about how they go about their life. But if that person gets hurt, we have our reaction. And if we were to see somebody react joyously to a family member of ours get hurt, no matter who that family member is, we're going to have a visceral reaction to that. And for the players in that locker room, that's what they had. And let's really think about how football players view this. Injuries are taken extremely seriously in football, much more serious than in basketball or any other sport. Players talk about it. They put their bodies and their lives on the line all the time. This is something players routinely say, so much to the point where it's a cliche when a football player says it. But they mean that shit when they say it. They put their lives and their bodies on the line. They've seen players die on the field, seen players get paralyzed by tackles on the field. Like, football is not a joke. It's a very serious game. And they take that part of it very serious. When players get injured, just look at how the players react to injuries in this sport, no matter what the caliber, to any other sport. They take a full knee. Some of them pray. A lot of them cry. Like, they take this stuff seriously. Like, injuries, death, they kind of see it as the same thing on the football field. They take this seriously. They don't think somebody got injured. They think that's one of my brothers out there and they just got wounded. Like, that's how seriously they take it. And we have a debate on whether players should take it that seriously or whether that's necessary in order to sustain the institution of football. Those are all deeper conversations than I have on this channel. But that is how players view this. They don't view this as, oh, he's hurt, he'll be back in 2 months. Or, oh, he's hurt, we'll see him next year. They view this as a visceral thing. He's wounded. I've seen players cry over seeing injuries like that or seeing their brothers go down like that. You've seen players cry. You've seen players say it's a very serious thing. It's a sacred thing when a player gets injured on a football field. And we know this because when somebody gets injured, you know to shut your mouth. We know this more than any other fans of any other sports, how sacred getting injured on a football field is taken and how seriously it's taken. So if you're a football player and you take it with that level of seriousness and you realize that this is not just an injury, this is a cart injury, which we take even more serious than just regular injuries. And not only is this a cart injury, this is an Achilles tear, which is, again, the most serious injury you can get as a football player that's not life-threatening. And you're watching Deshaun Watson getting put onto this cart. And you're watching this guy who, look, we might not like Deshaun Watson as a person, but we don't know Deshaun Watson as a person. These people have a relationship with Deshaun Watson, the human being. And they're watching that guy cry, probably for the first time in their lives, because he's contemplating all the things that you contemplate when you have an Achilles tear. And then they look up in the stands and they see people celebrating. Yeah, they're going to be furious. Now, do the fans have justifiable reasons to be celebrating? Some of them do. right? Like some of them have not been on board with this Watson thing for outside of football reasons, and that's been part of their consistent outrage over Deshaun Watson. Some of them were just like happy because Deshaun Watson ain't been playing that good and they wanted to see him hit the bench. We gotta keep it a buck here. I'm not here to judge people on an individual level on how they reacted to Deshaun Watson getting injured. If you cheered, that's on you. If you did not cheer, that's on you. If you are a player on that field and you did not like that they cheered, that's on you. And if you're a player on that field and you were indignant about it, that's on you. I'm not here to make a judgment about it because I understand the complexity of the entire situation. But understand this from the player's point of view. They just watched a dude who plays for the Cleveland Browns get cheered for being injured in Cleveland Browns Stadium. Some of them may never have a healthy relationship with the fans again because of that. And that's just what it is. And I understand it. And who knows what the consequences are because of that? Who knows what players are not going to want to play here anymore because of that? It's going to have a serious effect. It's not just going to be just Deshaun Watson. We all knew going into this game that it was a powder keg that could have been set off by anything. It wouldn't have taken much for something to get ugly in that stadium. And this is what happened to set off the powder keg. I am blaming this on them because this is something we specifically talked about being a possibility if Deshaun Watson went out there. It's not a coincidence. It's not random that this happened. This happened. It was something that was foreseeable by almost everybody. I've seen a ton of people make the prediction that Browns fans are going to cheer when Watson gets injured, and that's going to be something that's going to be talked about for a while here. We all saw this coming. We've lived through Tim Couch. We all saw it coming, except for the Browns front office. And that is complete mismanagement. You have to read the room. You have to read the room. And the one thing this franchise, this team, and the Barry and Stefanski regime has consistently told us they cannot do is read the room. This is not the first time where they've gotten into something because they cannot read the room. If something gets them fired, this is going to be what gets them fired. Their inability to read the room. Their inability to maybe think about, hey, this might have some effects off the field that we probably don't want to run ourselves into. They ignored all that stuff when they traded for Watson in the first place. Like they ignored everything from the cases he was accused of to the quarterback that he was replaced being a beloved figure. They ignored all of that. Thought winning would just cure it all. And then this whole thing, they put Watson out there. They think winning's going to cure it all. And they create this environment. And this environment breeds exactly what we told you it was going to breed. Ugliness. And we're pointing the finger at fans for booing. We're pointing the finger at players for feeling something. I understand why fans had the reaction that they did, although it's not one that I shared. I understand the frustration that got them to feel that way. Because for some fans, they've buried the burden of all of this. And Watson getting injured to them was like some release of this burden. It doesn't make what they did acceptable or appropriate, but it does make it understandable. Same thing goes for the players. I understand why they're lashing out like this because I can understand why they feel that way. I can understand the perspective that they come from. I can't blame the fans for reacting how they did, and I can't blame the players for reacting to how the fans did. What I can blame is the coach, is the owners. What I can blame, coaching, ownership, and GM, Andrew Barry, Kevin Stefanski, and Jimmy Haslam for not foreseeing any of this when all of this was obvious. That's who's to blame here. We can point the finger at the players. The players can point the finger at the fans. We can all give each other the finger for the rest of the season. But let's understand here who made this situation possible, who was the architect of this situation. And it's those three men. They had ample opportunity to avoid being in this spot. But pride, wanting to be proven right about this Watson trade when it was obviously time for it to be let go. All of this stuff, money, all of this stuff made them okay putting the quarterback, putting the team in an environment like that. And now we just going to act surprised that it bred the results that it bred. Nah, this is on them. This is on Jimmy. This is on Andrew Berry. This is on Kevin Stefanski, because at the end of the day, I can understand why the fans had the reaction they did, although I don't co-sign it. Same thing with the players. I don't co-sign how they react to this, but I can understand where they're coming from. The only people I can't understand are the people who justified putting Deshaun Watson out there at a home game when almost everybody told you it was a bad idea. Those are the only people I can't really find a real justification that's not pure pride. That's my 2 cents on that whole thing. Y'all have a great day. Having a better night. Peace.